Hello. So this is going to be my reaction to the data that came out yesterday, obviously the CPI data. If you guys aren't fully aware, the CPI data again was completely over the forecast. Okay, we'll actually go through this, or I'm going to show you exactly what the data showed yesterday. But before I go into that, just going to quickly clarify what I'll talk about. Going to talk about the CPI data, what it really means potentially for the economy, in my opinion, what is currently the reaction in terms of price to the CPI data, and what we can potentially now expect over the next 24 hours and so forth in terms of how the dollar is going to react, how gold is going to react, and all those different types of things, and what I potentially may do in terms of any sort of trades given where we are at the moment. So as I said at the beginning of the video, let me start again. At the beginning, or the video that I previously released kind of previewing the CPI data report, I kind of laid out two prospective scenarios where one is like where we kind of, the CPI data actually hits what was the expected forecast or goes slightly below, which would then kind of lead the overall narrative to be in favor of the Fed, because the Fed and Chairman Powell have constantly been saying that the inflation that we're experiencing now is transitory. On the other hand, I also mentioned that if we completely overshoot the forecast, right, so it's much higher than the forecast says, it's not going to add or give a lot of validation to the Fed. And it's, again, going to put a lot of pressure on the Fed to react to what is now some of the craziest inflation that we've seen in over 20 or 30 years, basically since the 70s, right? So just to show you the actual data yesterday that came out, if we go here. Yeah, so core CPI overshot by 0.5%. So the forecast was 0.4. So they were actually forecasting a decrease, but instead we got an increase from the previous month, right? So this is the fourth month in the row, as you can see here, where the inflation forecast is completely overshot. Inflation is crazy, guys. Everybody knows this, but the more and more and more that inflation keeps on getting like this, the more and more and more just overall volatility we're going to experience in the market, because you're going to have so many differing narratives, and it's going to become such a point of contention. Oh, the Fed needs to push, um, the Fed needs to raise interest rates sooner rather than later. The Fed needs to taper assets sooner rather than later. But then you have other people saying, oh no, but it's just transitory. It can remain high for a while, blah, blah, blah. And you're going to get these conflicting narratives all the time. And all that this is really going to do is lead to pretty strong volatility in the price of the dollar, and then ultimately as well, the price of gold. Now, one thing that I did mention in the video yesterday was that if we overshot the inflation data, right? So like I said, 0.9% here on the core CPI. Meanwhile, the CPI year on year, this is just crazy. The overall CPI, 5.4% year on year. That is just, I mean, that's pretty much unheard of, right? In recent economic history. It's just unheard of, right? This kind of high inflation number. This shows you, right, that I don't know. This transitory argument from the Fed is just losing more and more and more steam, because prices of just everything is inflating, okay? The Fed really used to try and say, okay, it's only certain things that are inflating, but the data doesn't lie. Sooner or later, it's clear that everything is just inflating, and it's not just transitory. But we all know that, right? As people who trade gold and who are kind of interested in gold and the economics, we know that this is all bullshit, right? Because obviously they've been printing way too much money too, clearly, okay? But so what I was saying yesterday is that if we completely overshot, right? If we completely overshot the the forecast, that actually it could be very negative for gold, because previously when we overshot the forecast the most recent time, the Fed actually released a statement saying we're looking to raise interest rates sooner and so forth, so forth. So my thesis was kind of that, or my kind of, I guess, yeah, thesis was that if we overshot, it's going to push this, it's going to make the Fed push this narrative more and more and more and more. And therefore, it's going to be negative for gold because any talk about raising interest rates is ultimately going to affect the gold market a lot, especially in times when inflation is just soaring, right? So again, I just want to reiterate, if you're kind of a beginner gold trader or just a beginner in Forex overall and beginner with economic sort of principles, if the Fed chooses to raise interest rates, it's definitely negative for the price of gold just because it gives investors more incentive, right? And whatever, who it may be, investors being companies or other countries or whatever, it gives them more incentive to buy dollars because you can actually earn better interest on holding those dollars instead of just holding gold, which is not an interest-bearing asset, okay? So that's why. However, if we start taking a look at the chart, the gold chart, right? This is when the news, the data was actually released and we initially got that big dump. We got that classic short-term volatility when big news releases. This is the effect of also people taking profits, then at the same time orders being triggered and all that, so forth, so forth. That's why you get that crazy up and down. But over the last, let's say 24 hours or so since the news was released, we have definitely seen gold actually trend upwards. So that's going against my thesis, right? So why was I kind of like wrong here? What is there, or was I just, did I completely miss the mark or whatnot? And what I would say is I probably missed the mark on the Fed's potential response, okay, which leads me to what is happening today. Powell is actually going to be testifying today again at 11:30 p.m., right? So my thesis was that it's not necessarily the inflation data that's going to make gold go down, but it's the response to the inflation data. Oh, we got to raise interest rates faster, blah, 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 right? Fed members speak all the time, right? They could begin talking about this, putting more pressure on gold and consequently also putting the dollar in a much more bullish mode. And sure enough, when the inflation data did release, look at this crazy upswing we had in the DXY, right? We tested back to this 92.8 relative high that we had hit over here, which, clearly is now proving to be pretty strong resistance at this point here. And now we're seeing the dollar just completely topple over again to the point where we're wondering, are we going to actually be able to hold the $92 level, right? There were the 92 point level here, which has previously held as quite strong support and resistance previously back here. Are we going to actually be able to even hold this now? So you can see that, as I was just saying previously in the video, you can see that this volatility is coming out to play. With these strong inflation numbers, it's not just like necessarily, oh, gold is going to go up or the dollar is going to go up, but just it's going to cause a lot of volatility more than anything. But so why are we now actually seeing gold go up, right? What could actually be the cause of this? And for that, we want to really look at what came out today in investing.com. Sorry, not here. There was an article that I just, on investing.com, that I just actually had open. It was, let's search for it here. Where was that article? Oh, here we go. Found it. So this article kind of sums it up clearly, right? As I mentioned, Powell is going to be speaking today at 11:30 p.m. my time. So I think that's about like 10:30 or 11:30 a.m. East Coast time in the States. But he typically, before these testimonies, he releases kind of remarks that he's going to be making prior to the news. And what did he say in this remarks? He says specifically, the U.S. job market is still a ways off from the progress the Federal Reserve wants to see before reducing its support for the economy. Okay, while current high inflation will ease in coming months, He further goes on to say, inflation has increased notably and will likely remain elevated in coming months before moderating. And said, restating the U.S. central bank's faith that current price increases, despite the concerns they are raising about unmoored inflation, are tied to the reopening of the economy and will prove fleeting. Meanwhile, there's still a long way to go in repairing a labor market that is 7.5 million jobs away from its pre-pandemic level. Ongoing Fed bond buying and a target interest rate held near zero will ensure that monetary policy will continue to deliver powerful support to the economy until the recovery is complete. And here it also mentions that there is no reason to rush any tightening of monetary policy, right? So sorry for jumping all over that article, right? I'll put a link to this article in the description below. But the point of this article, right, is that it's clear that Powell, right, and the Fed, at least until the next big Fed meeting, okay, which I believe is still in August, okay, but until the next big Fed meeting it happens, despite this inflation data, Powell is not going to talk more about raising interest rates or tapering asset purchases. So unfortunately, perhaps that whole narrative that was released, or that was really being pushed from the previous Fed meeting may not really be coming into play right now for the next few weeks. What does that consequently mean? The price of gold is probably going to go up and the dollar is going to become more and more bearish over the coming days. Now, we can't obviously say with 100% conviction that that's the case purely based off what Powell just released right now into the news. Obviously, we have to still wait for his testimony as well, 11:30 p.m. or p.m. my time. He's going to be answering questions. He may actually say other things which are, aren't this negative for the dollar as that article clearly states. Also, throughout the rest of the week, um, other Fed members could be speaking who actually may be more in favor of it, of raising interest rates, etc. Powell may speak again. There may be more pressure, all those different types of things. So can't say with 100% conviction. But what I would say is that the narrative is really kind of clearly, if anything, is, the Fed is very aware that they don't want to continue pushing that strong narrative. Okay, Powell's very aware that they don't want to continue pushing that strong narrative despite the crazy inflation numbers. They want to make sure people truly believe it's transitory, even though it's so clearly not. So to finally wrap up this video, I had a dollar bearish thesis for some time. I'm still not sure if I had a dollar bullish thesis for some time over the last few weeks. I'm still not sure if I'm totally gone from that thesis yet. I am definitely convinced that we're going to be seeing a lot more volatility though in the coming weeks with other data releases, etc. If we continue to see good jobs data or improved jobs data, that certainly is going to potentially affect gold negatively, affect the dollar positively. But with this inflation data is just absurd and probably is going to start trumping a lot of other data points in my opinion. Therefore, I would not be surprised that gold continues to actually, despite the volatility, actually starts continuing to trend upwards until there is renewed raise interest rate talk again, which I'm sure will come. Like, it's inevitable. But is that going to happen in the next few weeks until the next big Fed meeting in August? I don't believe there's another big one before that. So until August, is this kind of overall trend going to really change, I think? And this overall narrative really going to change? I don't think so. So I'm probably actually going to try and go a little more bullish on gold for the time being. That's my general take. Um, I'm going to look probably, in terms of trading, I'm probably going to look opportunities for pullbacks here. Obviously keeping in mind as well where we are with the dollar. Let's see if the dollar holds 92. And at the same time, let's also be aware that, people may want to also take profits. So there's gold bulls, obviously, you probably bought in this choppy sideways price action down here at around this now, what is looking like to be new 1800 support. So I would assume that therefore, short-term gold bulls are probably going to look to take profits around the 1840 level here, or price range, which was definitely a, pretty strong resistance here and support here, and potentially even at the 1850 level. So if I'm having a temporary, you know, bullish bias on gold at the moment, given everything that's going on with the fundamentals, of course, let's see what also Powell is going to say later today. That's very, very important. So I'm not going to probably make any trades prior to that, or at least until it gets a bit lower. But if we consider that the profit taking levels may be around 1840 or 1850, if if you can get any sort of positions between this 1820 and 1800 range, aiming for those profit levels up here, I think potentially it could be an interesting bet, given, of course, that you're managing your risk. So you don't go crazy. You make sure you have a stop loss there, obviously, in place, and you're managing your portfolio accordingly, right? Don't take lot sizes that are just ridiculous, obviously. But that's kind of what I may be eyeing for the moment. We're kind of getting a pullback right now. On the dollar chart, let's see if we maybe retest kind of go back to 19.2.5 or something like that before going a bit further down. That would be really interesting to see. I'm just eyeing maybe the top here, or like which was previous resistance here, maybe around 1814 could be interesting. Let's see just how everything goes. But that's kind of what I'm eyeing at the moment. Let me know what you guys think. Sorry for kind of rambling. I'm really tired right now because I had a really busy day dealing with other shit. Um, so that's why my thoughts and my general speech is kind of all over the place today. But let me know your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree. If you disagree, I'm happy to debate all this stuff. Okay? Anyways, take it easy, guys. Give me a thumbs up.